Thank you. Okay, I'm calling to order the meeting of the Ordinance Review Committee for the City of Grosse Pointe Park, January 7th, 2021. And we published an agenda, and the first item of the committee members are present. The first item of the agenda is public comment on agenda items. So I will turn this over to the city manager and assistant to city manager for public comment at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Reed. We don't have any written public comment, but Leah, do we have any spoken public comment at this time?
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. Yes, I do have one person in the queue, so I just need a second to pull up the timer.
Thank you.
And then Mary, you will be first if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Leah.
Share the screen for you so you know how much time you have, and then you can
This will
start.
take 15 seconds. So I want to make the quick point that I hope that ordinance review will have a place on the portal that we can go and click on and find stuff. And I hope that this recorded meeting will be posted soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other comments?
That's the only comment that I had in the queue, Councilmember Reed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, Planning Commission ordinance discussion. I'll introduce the item, and then I also have some, I'll bring in the city manager and the city attorney as well. The ordinance, or the Planning Commission ordinance, which we only recently amended or adopted, consists of 9 members, 9 commissioners for the Planning Commission, and one of those commissioners is the city manager, Nick Seisland. And during recent Planning Commission meetings, Mr. Seisland doesn't vote during the planning, on the Planning Commission or on any of our boards or commissions. So that leaves us with 8 voting members, which is the statute requires 5, 7, or 9. And it also leaves the possibility of a tie vote. So in discussing this with the city manager and the city attorney, because this is by ordinance, we can't simply change the Planning Commission without amending the ordinance. So and before I move on, I guess I'll ask the city manager if he has anything to add to that discussion.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Reed. So yes, as you did state, when the ordinance was passed, I think, we might have missed that accidentally it included me as a voting member, which is not the case. The city manager is not a voting member of the Planning Commission and or any other city commission. So at this time right now, there's 8 voting members, which could actually have a tie vote on the Planning Commission. So as the statute, Michigan Planning Enabling Act states, you have to have an odd number of voting members. That's 5, 7, or 9. So those are my comments, Councilmember Reed.
Okay, and I'll ask if the city attorney has anything to add to that.
No, and I think that's fine, and we certainly can make that change. And we should make sure everything is consistent amongst our code, our bylaws, and the statute should all be operating in concert. So,
okay. So to that, I guess, and just starting the discussion with the committee members. So I shared some materials with the committee members. I did some research first with all of the other Grosse Pointes, and then with some other cities. I tried to find cities that mirrored ours in terms of population or demographics. So in addition to the Grosse Pointes, Ferndale, Birmingham, Rochester Hills, Huntington Woods, Berkeley, Northville, and Plymouth. The city and the farms do not have a planning commission, so we can't look to them to see how they might do it. The Woods has a planning commission of 9 members. They have 8 appointees and 1 member of city council. The Shores has 7 members, 6 appointees, and 1 member of city council. Ferndale is similar to the Woods. And I spoke with the city manager. Birmingham has 7 members, all of whom are appointees, with alternates, 2 alternates from city council, but only 1 alternate can be called up at a time. And I shared that language. I won't read it all right now. Some of the other planning commissions that I included in my research, and if any of you did research, I welcome that as well. Some have no members of the governing body as a voting member of the planning commission. They have a liaison from the governing body to the planning commission. So that's my research. One, in terms of the easiest way to fix our statute, our ordinance, would be to simply reduce our planning commission from 9 to 7 members. And I included a proposal there which would leave the 6 appointees and reduce the ex officio to 1 ex officio member from council, which would be the mayor or 1 council person. And that the administrative officer of the city would serve as a liaison to the planning commission, but shall not be a voting member. So that's my research. That's one proposal. I'm not necessarily tied to it. This is just to start the discussion. So if any of my committee members would like to weigh in. Councilmember Robson.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. I guess I have a question for the city attorney. I think we're all agreed that by state statute, all planning commissions have to be a population of 9. Am I correct on that?
No, the statute is, and I was just looking at it, I think it's 5, 7, or 9. And the statute is silent whether those are voting members or not. So it's a little bit unclear. We have 9 members. I think that comports with the statute, but they're not 9 voting members. But I think common sense may dictate that whether you have 5, 7, or 9, that should be 5, 7, or 9 voting members.
Yeah. Traditionally, I always thought it was 6 citizen appointees and 3, if you will, ex officio. That's been our case, I think, historically. The question I would have is also, I was on the planning commission as a citizen appointee for 6 years, and then the council liaison. If memory serves me correct, and I'm not saying it does, in the past, was the city manager a voting member? In addition to that, Mr. City Attorney, can the city manager legally be a voting member?
I can't speak historically. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody with better perspective or a longer tenure than me can answer the question whether or not in the past. We certainly can get that answer, but I don't know offhand if in the past in Grosse Pointe Park, if I may, I was on it, and I'm saying I don't remember. I have to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know. So we can figure it out. But I don't think there's anything specifically that prohibits the city manager from being a voting member that I see. And under certain circumstances, ex officio members can vote. The way I interpret the statute and the way I've seen other rules interpreted, but I think it at least has been, it seems to me at least, our tradition, and I imagine it's why Nick is a non-voting member, that our city manager has participated but not been a voting member.
And then just speaking from my experience on the planning commission, very good issue about, what if there's a tie vote? That can always happen, but speaking as a Grosse Pointe Park Planning Commission historian, and I'm just throwing all these things out for the purposes of brainstorming, that really has not been an issue. I don't think I've ever seen a planning commission vote that was even close to being a tie. I'm just throwing that out for historical purposes.
Yeah, and just so it's clear, a tie vote is a no vote. It
Right.
has the same impact. In other words, for any, not just for planning commission, for any board or council or commission, you need a majority vote to pass something or act on a motion. So a tie vote is a no vote.
And I'm almost done flipping things around and brainstorming again about how many voting members we should have. Should we perhaps reduce the number or add them? Now, given that we have a new master plan coming and a lot of busyness and a lot of activity, I'd almost be in favor of increasing. In other words, maybe going from 7 to 9 voting members, if that's possible. And then when you throw into the pot, and I was thinking this afternoon, we have so many talented people in Grosse Pointe Park. We've learned that with our recent appointments. So something to chew on. That's what I assume we're doing tonight. We're just brainstorming at this point in time. So, Chairman, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Councilmember McConnell, would you like to weigh in?
Well, I was just trying to get some clarity. Just trying to do a little more homework on the other commissions. I mean, I think an odd number is good and healthy for any kind of board, so that you don't find yourself in a tie. So I would be supportive of that. I was just trying to see if there were opportunities for, alternative ways to get on the commission. I don't know if you spoke to that at all. So it's something that would be resident driven as opposed to administration driven, but I didn't think that's addressed in your notes. So.
I just, did you say something that's resident? I couldn't really quite make out what you said.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to clarify whether in your research you encountered where there were commissions that were positions that were resident driven versus administrative driven.
Yes, very much so. And quite a few. And that's part of, I think, this conversation and part of our conversation when we look at revision of the city code discussion is these aren't legislative committees. They're appointed committees made up of residents. And there's traditionally been a city council liaison to each of our commissions. And the planning commission has 2 ex officio, I guess we're not calling them liaison, I think really means one thing, and ex officio means something else. Ex officio is they're a member, they're a commissioner. Liaison is they serve, they attend the meetings and report back to the legislative body. So in quite a few cities, Birmingham was one example, the only time a member of the legislative body would serve on the planning commission is as an alternate. They were called up as an alternate, but quite a few of the cities that I looked at, and certainly my list isn't comprehensive, but quite a few have no representative from the legislative body as a commissioner, a voting member. They had liaisons serving. Sometimes it would be a council member and the city manager would serve, were designated in their ordinance as the liaison, or one liaison and an alternate. In terms of, yeah, so go ahead. That's where my research led me.
Okay. But those they were selected by whom? I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to get. They still would be.
It would still follow our charter in terms of the appointment process. Okay. I guess I'll let our city attorney answer that. But under our charter, the commissioners are appointed by the mayor with approval by council.
Yeah,
correct?
No, I thought, okay, I was trying to clarify if there was some other process that, but okay, I got it.
And that's correct. That's the process, and the charter dictates that.
So in terms of, did you have anything more to add, Councilmember McConnell?
No, not on that.
And just in responding to Councilmember Robson, I'm certainly open to having more commissioners. What I proposed was just an easy fix. It was just changing the numbers, and it wouldn't involve another appointment at this point, but I'm not opposed to adding more appointees. I just looked at that as the easiest way to fix it.
I hear you. Just that, you know, like my previous reasoning, it might be better to have one more. If we go down to 7, unless I'm incorrect, that would mean one of the council members stepping down, retiring, resigning,
Right.
however you want to call it.
My thought there was I didn't see any of the cities that I researched where they had 2 members of the legislative body, and none of our other commissions do. So I understand the tradition, but we only actually recently, and I think it was in 2019 when we got our 2019 when we got our, or 18, our planning commission in compliance with the staggered terms under the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, and there were a few other things that we did to get them in compliance. So, you know.
That is true. That is true. And then a lot of that was your hard work, by the way.
Thanks. And also, I agree. I've, you know, in terms of the history of the vote, but I'm always looking forward because we know the people who are involved now and their professionalism and what they have before them. But I really want our ordinance to be timeless, and that, you know, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road, an issue doesn't arise because we didn't correct it.
And I'm a big believer, if you will, in precedent. And I looked at your research, and no other community has more than one member from council on their commissions. That said, unless we're expected to make some type of decision tonight, I would like to get some feedback from both the mayor and the council representative. What are your thoughts on that? You want to move on this tonight, or can we get some? Am I being a wimp and sentimental? I don't know.
No. I mean, to that point, Councilmember Robson, we would have to get their input because we would only just say out of this committee, this is what we propose. And then as a full body, we would have to deliberate it and hash it out. And we've done that. I think, you know, I've been on the ordinance review committee for about a year. I've lost track of time, but we've sent things to council and they've tweaked them, and we have, as a body, have tweaked them. So I you know,
And-
certainly go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I wasn't trying to cut you off, but this essentially is an advisory committee. And so we could make a recommendation to council. We don't make the decision. Ultimately, that is Councilmember Reed, I think just said, was ultimately it's council's decision how they want to proceed. But, you know, we can make a recommendation or, you know, consider it a discussion matter, but ultimately it is the council's decision and how they want to proceed with that.
And Councilmember Reed could bring this up during her report of ordinance review to council.
Kind of a sidebar aside, and again, due to Councilmember Reed's great research, what serves as the planning commission for Grosse Pointe City? If anybody knows, in Grosse Pointe Farms, they do not have an official planning commission, so they mark that out.
Their councils.
This council serves as a planning commission. Oh,
Yeah. So for example, I mean, I think in recent history, the hotel issue in the village, that wasn't before a planning commission, that, and I'm sure Councilmember Robson, you recall, that was in the news a lot. So all those meetings, the presentations from the various developers, that all was before their full council.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the statute doesn't require that we have one.
Right.
Um, City Attorney, I do believe though our charter does. I forgot to go back and check that, but I'm pretty sure.
I think that's right. Our charter
Yeah.
provides for planning commission as a separate entity. And so, yes, we can, what we're discussing tonight, we can sort of change the terms of how it's comprised and whatnot. But yes, we do, our charter does call for a separate planning commission.
So in terms of just procedurally, and I'll put this to the city manager because I know he was working hard today on our agenda for Monday. So I would assume you're not ready for us to put something like this on. Well, if we were to put this on the agenda for our Monday meeting, it would be an add-on.
Yes, yeah, per the code of conduct, the agenda was posted today. However, in this case, if we could, if that's what the ordinance review would like to do, we could quickly, which Councilmember Reed did provide in the document to us, those changes, we could make that quick change and add it to the agenda if that's what the ordinance review committee would like to see happen. So yes, that could be on the Monday agenda.
I would support it being on there just so we can keep things moving forward. I mean, it doesn't mean that we'll have resolution, but
Right.
We might as well at least keep things progressing.
They could vote on it. They could send it back to us. They could offer their recommendations and we could keep it. We could table any action on it to our February meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have
February meeting?
Well, it would be January, but January 11th, we could say we're not ready to vote on this. Come back on February, correct?
Do that, sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes.
So what we're talking about is putting on the agenda a discussion on this issue, I guess, would that be correct?
It would be, I think, more of a recommendation from the ordinance review committee, a recommendation to the city council, consistent with what Councilmember Reed sent around earlier, for it to be 7 commissioners and 1 city council member as opposed to the current setup. And then to your point, that would be discussed, potentially voted on, maybe tabled, whatever the case, it could be dealt with the way any motion would be, but it would come in the format of a recommendation that would be on the agenda.
Okay, full body, healthy discussion,
Yeah,
Exactly.
not by everything else. All right, it's fine by me.
great, okay. Then we will direct the city manager to add that to our agenda for Monday, January 11th. And we'll move on to the discussion of codification of the city code. And I shared some resources, I think some discussions I've had with the city manager and others. There is an entity known as Unicode, and many of the very cities that I referenced use Unicode. So they would be a good resource if you want to familiarize yourself. But it is a process of consolidating our legislation in online. It's searchable. I'm going to, the city manager and I talked about it today and in the past. So I'm going to defer to him. He has some familiarity and he also is aware of how something like Unicode, a codification of our ordinances would be beneficial to him and to our residents.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Reed. So asking around the city here, so Councilmember Robson may recall, but I talked with Finance Director Clerk Blayhut, who said at one time we did have Unicode. I believe this was just back before the recession, and then due to budget cuts, it was reduced. And so in that time, we've had Bodman had actually went ahead and worked on codifying our code, which, as you know, right now is in a PDF format. It does work, however, it does have its difficulties too for easy search. And so the challenges I see every day as city manager in our departments is that oftentimes will have concerns regarding code enforcement and or building or vendors that are trying to easily search for those keywords that helps them to the relevant ordinance. And so I think this is a process of codifying this code that would be very beneficial to the residents and to vendors and to city staff as well. It would really speed up our process. As Councilmember Reed said, there are options like MuniCode is probably the gold standard out there, eCode 360, and or if we wanted to go with the cheapest alternative, we could do a searchable PDF, but I do think this is something that would be most beneficial to invest that monies into a codifying process. So this is something that we've already looked into about, we can create a, easy request for proposals process, asking for companies to submit. And, this is something that the clerk and I have already looked into as we prepare our budget process to and ask the council for that funding. So those are my comments. Turn it back.
I would just like to add one more thing. So for example, when I would go on, let's say City of Birmingham, I hope theirs was one that did this. And I looked at their planning commission. From there on their website, there was a link that said, for the statute, click here. I would click there. It would take me right to their the statute. The statute would cite the state law. So, I mean, ours does as well, but it had the state law side. It would say, when it was amended and updated. And then once you were in the code, it was really easy to search. And what I hear from residents who are doing any type of major renovations where they have contractors or architects, it's very difficult to wade through our city code as it is right now. It's just, in most of the professionals, of the building trades professionals and architects are used to Muni code, so they find ours somewhat antiquated. So I want, it's a discussion I've had with the city manager and others probably over the last year or two. So I just wanted to bring that discussion to our ordinance review committee. I mean, I don't, it would be a process, but I wanted to get it on the radar and start familiarizing us with it. And, so comments, questions?
One thing I'll add real quick, I forgot to say one thing, and I'm sure Councilmember Reed, you saw it as well with Muni Code, is that it's easily accessible and shareable, especially like if you want to add it to your email, you want to share, the code via social media. It's extremely user-friendly process.
Agreed.
I get one question I have. I think we need, and it bleeds into the next agenda item, but there's some significant updating I think we should do to our zoning code and things like that. So if we do engage somebody like Municode, is there any additional cost, if we have to change things and then sort of update their system, or are we better off putting in the work on the front end and then engaging them? I'm just curious about that, because I do think one of the goals in 2021, I think we all agree, is there's a lot of updating that needs to be done, which we're happy to do. But I don't want to, engage that and then sort of, we're already going to be reinventing one wheel. I don't want to reinvent another wheel and pay for it. So that is just a question I have. I don't know the answer to it.
So I can comment on that, City Attorney Howlett. So that's something, to my knowledge, that most companies, as soon as you make a change, there is a small fee assessed to each change. However, after I go out for an RFP process, that's something that we would request of each of those companies to see what that cost would be. I couldn't tell you an exact number off the top of my head, but certainly something I'll look into.
So just, I'm sorry.
I think Councilmember Robson, were you?
Yes, yeah.
I defer to Councilmember McConnell.
Thank you kindly. So first of all, if I'm understanding this correctly, our committee would not be tasked with doing any of that review any longer. We would be engaging an outside firm to do all of that. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I just want to clarify, we would hire an outside firm and the committee would not be doing that work anymore.
oh, that's not how I understand it.
Oh, okay. Well, part of
Yeah.
you said that you said something about legislation and so I didn't know if we're going to be doing reviews on those items as well.
Right. We would still control the content, or when I say we, you as a committee, subcommittee, and then the council would still control the content. Municode is more like sort of like a clearinghouse where it's published, accessible, searchable.
Okay.
that kind of thing. So
Okay.
we
I
have
just
full
wanted to
control of
show
the
my
content.
work prior to the meeting.
Yeah.
Are those all the updates we need, Councilmember McConnell?
At least my take anyway. So, but so that was one, and then I'm as you know, I'm always bird dogging the cost. I mean, you said you referenced the budget, and of course we were still in a pandemic. Is this something that is affordable, reasonable, and is this going to hurt any other needs that we have as a city?
To be honest, Councilmember McConnell, I don't believe, this is an amount that would hurt us. If anything, I think it's more of a benefit to the community and to the city staff here. It would certainly improve timeliness for code enforcement, for our building department here, even myself while I'm reviewing, and I know our city attorney. And then, oftentimes we'll get many phone calls from residents asking, where's this at? Or, so we're having trouble trying to click on the link, use Control F to find a keyword. And so I think this is something easily we can attain in the budget. And so I can work through that process to get what the appropriate cost would be, and then ask the council if their pleasure is to have that in the budget, which I would highly recommend. So.
Well, and I do appreciate that an RFP process will be done. I just want to mention that as well. So thank you.
Councilmember Robson?
Just a few things. I think we can all agree that the current code is, if you will, stuck in the 20th century, and we should move on to something better and more user-friendly. Question for the city manager. City of Grosse Pointe has been using this Muni code for a couple of years, as I understand it. Have you gotten any feedback about any difficulties that they've had, or any unforeseen situations that we should know about?
I think at first it's training of city staff and residents, going from one platform to another. Obviously, there's always going to be, some technical glitches, and reviewing those, making sure hyperlinks work and that. But otherwise, over time, talking with City Manager Peter Dame, him and I are always sharing resources and are looking through our ordinances, and it's always easier going to Grosse Pointe cities for myself, able to search rather than he going to Grosse Pointe Parks at the moment.
I hear you. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember McConnell?
Sorry, just a follow up to that. So would there be additional costs as it relates to training that we would need to build in, or would that be built into the RFP response, or how would that part work?
I'll have to check and see what the responses come back. I truly don't believe there's any training that would be required. If there was any changes to the ordinance, that's actually sent to the company, and they go ahead and do it for the city. So the city staff wouldn't be required to edit or do anything on those platforms. It's just more training of how to use the platform itself, which I would seem to believe, I'd be more than happy to, and our staff of training our employees. But if it's included, we'll be happy to have that.
So procedurally, as a committee, and I'm drawing on my experience from the communications committee when we pursued the website, you have to refresh my memory, City Manager Seisland, whether the committee directed you to pursue the RFPs for the website and you presented them to the committee, and then we took those to City Council, or did City Council actually have to authorize you to even do the RFP process? Because as I understand, there would be no cost associated with that. Or maybe the city attorney can weigh in as well.
So you're talking the city website, right? When we
Yeah,
did
when we did that a couple of years ago, and you were assistant then, but you actually kind of spearheaded that. And I know as a committee, you presented the bids to the committee.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I
and
believe there's some, oh, sorry.
yeah,
I was going to say, I believe what we did is that this was a constant discussion of city council at the time. And then I know, I believe, we sent it over to the communications committee, and then we went back to council. And I believe it was at the council level that they agreed with the communications committee that we should go out and direct, at the time myself as assistant to the city manager, to go out for an RFP, which at that time, I then brought it back to the communications committee where we reviewed the proposals with our recommendation, which then we went to council. And
so, okay. So, and then just continuing that, since you're looking at this for a 2021-22 budget, certainly we can continue this discussion and ordinance review and have you advance it to a council agenda sometime before we have to vote on the budget. Does that work for you?
that works for me. You know what I can do is I can bring it up, Councilmember Reed, as a new discussion topic, that this is something that the ordinance review committee would like to do, and I can explain the process of what I'm going through and how this will be something we need to discuss during the budget. But just so it's on everybody's radar, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay. I'm not looking to add anything to Monday's agenda on that note.
Thank you.
So as a committee, are we in agreement with with the city manager's action plan to bring that the codification to city council at some point between now and our budget workshop?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. Anything else on that topic? Okay, moving on. The last item before public comment is revision of city code discussion. So the city manager and I, in developing really the agenda and in discussions we've been having for a while. So the codification is sort of a big picture, like what does it take to borrow a phrase from Councilmember Robson, bring us into the 21st century. What are the things that we need to look at in the interim, or if we need to delay this process for budgetary or other reasons? So I'm going to turn this over to the city manager, but there were a few things we discussed, and I noted those to you, and that is, and they've kind of already come up: code enforcement, zoning, and then, and I'll kind of save this for last, but the city manager and I had a discussion about council commission members versus liaisons, which ties into our earlier discussion on the planning commission. So with that, city manager Seisland, if you'd like to address those more immediate areas of concern in our code, at least from your perspective.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Reed. So, we do have a code enforcement staff person that works 2 days a week, and they're in charge of enforcing our city code. Oftentimes, they're more, the most common ones we'll see is, longer grass and or disrepair of a building and or blight. Oftentimes, as we're reviewing certain code violations, we'll find that they may have worked in the 1980s or 1990s or 2000s. However, there are certainly some minor changes that could be need, not a complete overwrite of the code. And that's, something that we've looked into specifically. I can even say, for example, lighting is a bigger thing now, where LED lights are, more prevalent. They're much brighter, and we've had more issues in regards to that. With a simple change of the code, we'd be able to have an easier process for our code enforcement officer to work with residents and issues those tickets if may be. Another one, I can use as an example that's come up of late is the generators, the gas generators that are on the sides of homes. Those are becoming more prevalent. And at the time when our code was written, in-house generators were starting to be newer and they were louder, as where they're much more quiet now. And, that's something that I've looked at with our building department, switching gears, where this would speed up our processes, with the building department and the trades. And so I've actually, like Councilmember McConnell had, we're going to have to talk, because I saw you had some good notes there. And I know Councilmember Reed does too, because I've got a running tally as well of a couple minor changes that could be done. So, what I would like to do, but that's certainly the commission's pleasure, or committee's pleasure, is I'd like to bring to you a list of certain minor changes that could be made, regarding priorities that I see, moving forward, and if that would be something that the committee would like to move to the city council. I mean, I have quite a bit, and it's something that is really important, speeding up our processes and being clearer in, that language.
Thank you. Any comments from the other committee members? Councilmember McConnell, I saw you first.
So yeah, I think there are plenty. I would be, obviously, I've already put these post-it notes in, so I'd love to be able to participate and offer some things that I identified. I do also think it's a good resident engagement opportunity if we can figure out some way to think about how we can involve residents in that. Maybe they either have some firsthand experience, or it's a good exercise, frankly, a good learning exercise too. About half of folks don't even know which of these are here and which aren't, and so maybe they have some thoughts. So I'd love to figure out a way to think about that. And but yeah, we've seen some examples recently too where it's clearly some things are out of date. So I think this is great. I'd love to see us move forward, and more of us may have ideas about that than not, and so we should try to tackle as many as we can if we can.
Thank you. Councilmember Robson?
Yeah, I can't be more enthusiastic about that. Code enforcement is in my emotional wheelhouse. We have a hardworking code enforcement officer and staff. I think all of us get a lot of phone calls about, in particular, blight or this issue or that issue. So yeah, let's move forward.
So at the committee level, it sounds like, if I'm hearing the city manager, the most efficient way would be, for example, to convene a meeting with the focus to be code enforcement, and we tackle that list, and then maybe zoning's a whole separate issue, but at our next meeting to be determined. And then, of course, I expect I'm sure other committee members would have their own list, but if the focus was just what tweaks do we need to make to the code enforcement ordinances to modernize them and to make them easier to live with for residents and for, go ahead, yeah.
If I could, yeah. One, it'll make our job handling the prosecutions much more efficient, clear, and clear to the residents. And there are certain ordinances, sign ordinances that are a little outdated because the laws have changed also. And so my suggestion would be, if we start with code enforcement, we should all kind of put our own list together, including me talking to our past prosecutors, our current prosecutor, and seeing where those gaps are. Mr. Seisland, as city manager, can talk to the administration where they see the problems. And then we can sort of, as a group, we can prioritize those lists. And then we, as a law firm representing the city, can start tackling where we need to make those changes and present those, through the appropriate channels. But I think that's the best efficient way to determine the gaps, make the changes that are required. And then we can do the same thing with zoning, because it's the same problem with zoning. It's just old, it's outdated. And, we don't have a community like some where there's a lot of development, but there's been a lot more development recently. And I think we need to catch up with that as quickly as we can.
Okay.
And if I just may add, I'm sure the city manager has done this already. Obviously, we would want to get in-depth feedback from the code enforcement officer, Mrs. McConaughey, and the staff as well.
Absolutely. They're on the front lines every day, helping and assisting the city here. So they have plenty of ideas. I know they're happy to share with me, the most common code enforcement changes that we could make.
Okay, any further discussion? Then I think that discussion covers both code enforcement and zoning. So it sounds like moving forward, we're in agreement to tackle them one at a time, with probably code enforcement being higher priority. Is that?
I agree, Councilmember Reed, on code enforcement issues.
Okay. And then that last item under revision of city code discussion, the council commission member versus liaison. I sort of, there were a couple things that, and I wanted to bring up, and it's more of a philosophical discussion at this point, but it came up in our discussion about the planning commission, and that is having a member of the legislative body actually even on the commission. We do have that for our boards and commissions. We have at least one member of the legislative body on planning, parks and recreation, beautification, and then DDA and TIFA. So in my discussion with, and one of the reasons this came up to me, came to my attention, is from our last city council meeting. One of the things that the mayor said when we voted on the DDA bylaws, he voted to be consistent with how he voted at the DDA meeting. And so it occurred to me that we're sort of mixing an appointed body with an elected body, and you have, if you have the liaison member as a voting member, then they're voting twice. But they're not, their first vote is not part of the deliberative process with the legislative body. So I had this discussion with the city manager. I don't know, we actually talked about this earlier today. He was somewhat intrigued by it, so I added it as a discussion item. I think of late, for example, on the Recreation Commission, for example, the dog park is a topic that if the council members, and it didn't happen that way with the current situation, but it did, I don't know, what was that, 2015 or so. So I hope I'm articulating myself, if you understand what I'm saying. There's one council member who's often looked to, I've served on 2 commissions now, who's looked to by the commissioners as, well, you're our authority, what should we do? So it may be something to consider whether the council member should even be a voting member on the commissions. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know the city manager was intrigued by the thought, and I wanted to get the committee's thoughts on that. And it's really just a discussion point. So. Councilmember Robson.
Thank you. I'm from the school, basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but I'm an old timer, but I'm thinking of, I guess I'm asking, and I need the feedback of everybody. What changes are we suggesting here? Like there not be a voting member from the city council on the Recreation Commission, by example? Is that what is being explored or asked to be being explored, or what? I'm trying to find out.
Right. So whether the council member is a commissioner or they're a liaison and they serve as the intermediary between the commission and the council. So we serve on commissions and committees, and we're attending this meeting, and then I'm going to report back on Monday, and I do the same with the Recreation Commission. But also, and I believe the bylaws consider me a commissioner, and I know for beautification as well. So that's the distinction. The only thing that really would change is whether you're a voting member of the commission. I think you're still attending their meetings. you're still the go-between between council and the commission. That's something that intrigued me in my research. And like I said, at the last city council meeting, it's something that just kind of stuck in my mind where the mayor said, well, I want to be consistent. And so I've been thinking about that because the deliberative body is supposed to deliberate together. So I wanted to put it out there. It's something to think about. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on it.
I guess I would say I see what you're saying. But again, I don't know. You mentioned 2015 and the dog park issue, I guess, but I don't see any, like a better term, personally, I don't see any need to change, but that's only my opinion. So, but there's more discussion, I'm sure.
Well, I'm sorry.
Councilmember McConnell, please.
Bear with me.
We're
Sorry.
waiting for you.
All right. So I think I see where you're going. Like, let's say the commission voted to, I guess, oppose the dog park, right? If we give an extreme example, and then you're on the commission, and then now it comes before the council, that's the recommendation, and you have to vote for it as a council member. Is that a good scenario? Okay.
Yeah.
So I understand the value of maybe having some disconnect because, yeah, you might have to sort of vote against yourself, essentially.
And I guess what struck me is during the deliberative process, we're supposed to be listening to our fellow council members, and that may sway our vote. They may say something we haven't thought of, but if we're already married to our vote, that's what got me thinking about this. And I think that would be tied, this discussion is tied in with revision of the city code. So again, it's not necessarily an action item for Monday or for a council meeting in the foreseeable future, but as we're looking at updating our code enforcement and zoning, it's something we might want to look at.
And if I just could, and maybe this isn't quite a legal opinion, but I think it would be interesting to bring this to the attention of the council and sort of hear what, sort of they think. I mean, I see both sides of this issue. I don't have a strong feeling either way, and it's not up to me regardless. But, I would be curious to just hear what the body sort of has to say. I could take a position either way. And see the value in both sides of that coin. Mm-hmm. Certainly understand what you're saying. People can change their vote. Nobody's,
right,
married to it, but it does create an inconsistency. So I think it's a very interesting question, and would be curious to hear kind of what the broader body has to say about it.
Sure. So, I mean,
yeah.
I really, again, not looking to add anything to Monday other than what we've just added, but maybe we can put this on as a discussion item for our February council meeting if the rest of the committee would like to do that.
February would be fine.
Okay. Any other comments on that topic? Okay, then moving on. Now we're at public comment on non-agenda items. So I will turn this over to the city manager and assistant to the city manager.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Reed. So we don't have any written public comment at this time, but what I'm going to do is share my screen with the timer because I do have 2 spoken public comments in the queue. So give me one moment here. Okay, and Anna, you are going to be first to speak. I'm going to start the 3-minute timer and unmute you. And please go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you. So Nick, you had told me before that your predecessor, the prior city manager, change the ordinance to allow 100 dog park passes into Patterson and Windmill Point Park. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So my question is then, if the city manager was able to change that ordinance, does the new city manager have the authority to change it back or to add 100 more dog park passes into the parks? And so that's one question, is who has the authority to change the city ordinance when it comes to dog park passes inside of our city parks? And is there any option to reevaluate dogs being allowed inside of our parks? There have been some instances where dog owners are not abiding by the rules, where just today we were out at the ice rink ice skating, and there was, maybe this isn't against the rules, but there was a large dog walking around the rink where children are skating and folks are sitting on the benches as they're putting their ice skates on. And it just seems inappropriate for dogs to be walking so close to our city park users and our children. I've seen a dog owner who dropped their leash when the dog was on the boardwalk and threw a ball to the dog. I've seen a small child, 5 years old, walking a dog without an adult supervising. So the dog owners are not following the posted rules of the dog park passes as holders of these dog park passes. And I think we ought to revisit this ordinance and prohibit dogs from the city parks, which they have been prohibited for decades. It's only been recently that we've been allowing dogs into the parks. And I think that it's going to long-term cause harm to, to children or other adults or other dogs, or it's going to be an environmental, concern as they're trampling all over the grass and urinating. And I guess the question is, at what point do we not allow dogs into the parks? And at what point do we limit the dogs, and so that children have a safe place to go where dogs are prohibited in the city? Thank you.
Now I have, let me reset my timer. And then Mr. Porter, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I'll start the timer. Please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Ron Porter, and I live on Pemberton Road. I'm commenting about section 27-101I of the city code, which purports to regulate political campaign signs. A couple of days after the in-person voting in the November election, I returned to my home while walking my dog on a leash and noticed the city ordinance vehicle parked in front of my house. By the time I got there, the vehicle was gone, but there was a letter on my porch telling me that I was in violation of this particular ordinance and asking me to remove the signs from my front yard. I wrote a letter to code enforcement at grosspointpark.org and also copied the city manager and all the city council. I received a couple of responses from the city council, no response from the city administration, which I was not surprised at. But my basic point in the letter is that that ordinance is unconstitutional, and we are spending city resources going around. I talked to several other people who got this same notification, and so the ordinance person must have been driving around much of the day dropping these things off. And it's a waste of money and it's a waste of time because the ordinance is clearly unconstitutional. It is a content-based ordinance. It applies only to signs of a certain content, and it's under Supreme Court precedent clearly unconstitutional. So my ask to the ordinance group here is to either immediately ask the city council to repeal it, which probably won't occur because you will want to make it part of some sort of reform package, or tell the city ordinance officer to stop us wasting time trying to intimidate residents into complying with an ordinance that's unconstitutional. There's real liability issues for the city if you continue to do this. All you have to do is look at City of Grosse Pointe Shores that picked a fight with one of their residents, and they're now in federal court spending tens of thousands of dollars. Now they have an issue, they have a better case than the park does about the constitutionality of the ordinance. But nonetheless, we shouldn't be spending money and time and exposing the city to liability trying to enforce an unconstitutional ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed, that's the only, let me stop here. That's the
Thank you, City
only
Manager.
public comment.
Manager, before we move further, I would like to ask our city attorney to address that last comment on the sign issue, if you will, please.
Yeah, and that was referred to our office. There should not be any further attempt to enforce that. We are examining the sign ordinance, I should say. The law has changed. There have been Supreme Court cases. And so at this time, you shouldn't see any, enforcement action on that. You received the initial letter, but there is not going to be a follow-up on that. And then we're examining the code and how to either repeal that and replace it or amend it to be consistent with the law.
And then just to the city manager on that, has administration directed staff to not even send the letter at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So as soon as this issue came up, this was immediately stopped by my office. And I do believe, and I apologize to Mr. Porter, I'll certainly look. I thought code enforcement had reached out to you, sir. But this is something that as soon as this was found out, we stopped right away.
Okay, is this, city manager, this is one of our antiquated ordinances that we need to fix Muni code or not? If I'm understanding you and our city attorney as well.
That's correct. This is one of those on the top priority list.
Thank you. Councilmember McConnell, I think had a comment before we adjourn as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, appreciate Mr. Porter calling in. And I think that was one of the first issues that that was on my radar when I was appointed to the council, because I saw a number of threads about it on social media. And so I did make an inquiry about it, and I did find this code and reported out that, you can only have 2 political signs, and then they can only be up for 2 days after the election. And it was my understanding from City Manager Seisman that in this instance, there were people who actually called and complained that historically there has not been any kind of aggressive enforcement over this. I mean, sometimes I have 4 or 5 signs. So, but that specifically people actually called in to complain. So it's unfortunate, we have some interesting times that we live in, but I'm glad that, the law department and our corp counsel as well as city manager taking some aggressive action. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McConnell and Councilmember Robson.
I would just, I have no idea. I will find out after the meeting what the contents of the notification was and what the issue was. As council members, we get all sorts of feedback that there's too many signs, there's not enough signs, this, that, and the other thing. But that's for a discussion of our committee down the road. So, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I don't know, as a advisory committee, I don't know how formal our rules are, if I have to ask for a motion to adjourn or if I can just say we are adjourned. City attorney?
I think either one would work fine.
Okay.
My guess is there's no objection to adjourning.
Yes. If there's nothing further and no objection, then I will adjourn the meeting of the Ordinance Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Happy New Year, everyone.